In the winter of 1943, far from the famous beaches and burning cities, a quiet battle was fought inside a wooden hut on the edge of the Swedish town of Boden. Officially, Sweden was neutral. Unofficially, its railways, radios, and frozen forests had become listening posts in a war that respected no borders. At the center of this hidden struggle was a 26-year-old linguist named Karin Lendholm, whose weapon was not a gun, but a pencil worn down to a splinter. Karin worked for the Försvarsstaben, Sweden's military intelligence. Each night she sat before a shortwave receiver, headphones, pressing her hair flat, copying streams of numbers tapped out in Morse code. The messages came from everywhere. Norway, Finland, the Baltic coast. Most were meaningless noise. Some were routine. A few, however, carried the unmistakable rhythm of German military traffic. Those were forwarded to Stockholm, translated, summarized, and quietly shared with the Allies through back channels that officially did not exist. Late one night in February, Karin intercepted a transmission that felt wrong. The signal was strong, almost careless, as if the sender believed no one was listening. The message repeated every hour, always identical. That alone was suspicious. German operators changed codes frequently, especially on sensitive routes. Karin copied the numbers, stacked the pages neatly, and marked them with a small red dot. It was the sign she used when her instincts refused to be silent. Over the next 3 days, the message continued. Karin compared it to older intercepts and noticed something else. The transmission schedule matched the passage of a specific train line, running through occupied Norway toward the Arctic port of Narvik. That line carried iron ore, vital for German steel production. But the numbers did not fit any logistics code she recognized. They were too short, too precise. Karin asked for permission to work beyond her shift. Her supervisor, a tired colonel who trusted her talent more than the rules, nodded without questions. She slept on a cot beside the receiver and lived on black coffee and bread. Slowly, patterns emerged. The numbers aligned not with cargo, but with timing, distances, tides. Karin realized she was looking at a naval coordination signal. Something meant to synchronize ships and coastal defenses. If she was right, the Germans were preparing to move something important through Narvik's icy waters. Something worth protecting with secrecy that had somehow failed. Karin compiled her analysis into a thin report and sent it south under diplomatic seal. Officially, it was an internal memo. Unofficially, it was destined for British hands. The reply came faster than she expected. British intelligence thanked the Swedes politely and asked for confirmation. Karin felt a chill unrelated to the winter outside. If the British were asking questions, then her message had landed where it mattered. She returned to the hut with renewed focus, determined not to make a mistake that could cost lives. On the 6th night, the signal changed. A single digit shifted position to Wandonels. It was trivial. To Karin, it was an alarm bell. She recalculated everything. The change meant acceleration. The operation had moved forward by nearly 24 hours. She sent another report immediately, emphasizing urgency. This time, there was no polite delay. A courier arrived before dawn to collect her notes in person. 2 days later, news crackled through foreign broadcasts that Karin was not supposed to hear. A German convoy carrying critical radar equipment had been ambushed off the Norwegian coast by Allied forces. The ships were damaged, one sunk, the cargo lost to the sea. Official statements were vague. Success was attributed to aerial reconnaissance and luck. Sweden's role was not mentioned at all. Karin returned to her routine. The hut remained cold. The pencil grew shorter. No medals were awarded. No speeches made. Neutrality demanded silence. Yet, weeks later, her supervisor placed a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a photograph of a British destroyer crew, smiling despite exhaustion. On the back, a simple line was written, "From friends you will never meet." The war rolled on, loud and merciless elsewhere, but in Boden the radios kept whispering. Karin listened, translated, and passed the truth along invisible paths. When peace finally came in 1945, her work ended without ceremony. She packed away her notebooks and returned to civilian life, carrying secrets that history would never footnote. Decades later, Historians would argue about how much neutral nations truly influenced the war. Files would be declassified, numbers re-examined, conclusions debated. Karin Lindum's name would appear, if at all, as a brief reference in an appendix. Yet on one frozen coast, on one decisive night, the war had tilted slightly because a young woman trusted her instincts, listened carefully, and understood that even silence could be a battlefield. For Karin, the memory that lingered longest was not the intercepted codes or the tension of those nights, but the fragile balance she had lived within. She had served truth while pretending indifference, aided destruction while preserving peace at home. In later years, when students asked her what she did during the war, she smiled and said she worked with radios. It was true, and it was not. Sometimes, alone, she wondered how many lives had been saved, and how many had been lost despite her efforts. There were no clear answers, only the certainty that small actions mattered. The war had been decided by factories, generals, and armies, but also by individuals in forgotten rooms, listening when others slept. Karin accepted that she would never be recognized as a hero. She did not need to be. Knowing that she had acted when it counted was enough. In the quiet after the storm of history, she found peace in anonymity, understanding that the greatest victories of World War II are often invisible, carried on the air as fleeting signals caught by careful minds, and transformed into choices that changed the world without ever announcing themselves. Forever unseen, yet decisive.